3 billion people watched as Muhammad Ali's trembling hands reached for the Olympic torch. His body shook violently from Parkinson's disease. Many thought he would drop it. Some wondered if this was cruelty, forcing a sick man to perform for the world. But what Ali did in the next 60 seconds didn't just light a flame. It proved that the human spirit can shine brightest when the body is at its weakest. This is the story of the most powerful moment in Olympic history. July 19, 1996, Atlanta, Georgia. The Centennial Olympic Games were about to begin, and the world was waiting to see who would light the Olympic cauldron. It's one of the most sacred traditions in sports. The final torchbearer is always someone special, someone who represents the Olympic spirit, someone whose presence adds meaning to the ceremony. Names had been circulating for weeks. Hank Aaron, the baseball legend, Evander Holyfield, the heavyweight champion, Carl Lewis, the track and field icon. All were Georgia natives, all made sense. But the Olympic organizers had a secret. They'd chosen someone whose appearance would shock the world and break hearts in the best possible way. They'd chosen Muhammad Ali. There was just one problem. Ali was visibly struggling with Parkinson's disease, and nobody knew if he could physically do what they were asking. By 1996, Ali had been living with Parkinson's syndrome for 12 years. The diagnosis had come in 1984, 3 years after his final boxing match. The disease, likely caused by the estimated 200,000 blows Ali had absorbed during his 21-year boxing career, was destroying his nervous system. His hands shook uncontrollably. His movements were slow and stiff. His once booming voice, the voice that had taunted opponents and recited poetry, had been reduced to a whisper. The man who'd called himself the greatest, who'd floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee, could barely walk across a room without assistance. People who encountered Ali in the mid-1990s were often shocked by his condition. This wasn't the Ali they remembered from television, the fast-talking showman who could command a room. This was a man whose body had betrayed him, whose motor skills had deteriorated to the point where simple tasks like holding a cup or signing his name required tremendous effort. His face had become mask-like, one of the cruel symptoms of Parkinson's that robs people of their expressions. The most expressive face in sports had gone blank. Many people assumed Ali's public life was over. He'd made occasional appearances at charity events, usually sitting down, speaking rarely, if at all, letting others talk for him. The Ali who'd commanded press conferences and dominated interviews was gone, replaced by a silent, shaking figure who seemed like a ghost of his former self. Some fans found it too painful to watch. They preferred to remember him as he was, young, strong, invincible.
But Ali's wife, Lonnie, knew something the rest of the world didn't. Behind the trembling exterior was the same fighting spirit that had made Ali a champion 3 times over. Yes, his body was failing. Yes, the disease was progressing. But Ali wasn't finished. He'd told Lonnie that he wanted to keep living publicly, keep showing the world that Parkinson's might slow him down, but it wouldn't stop him. When the Olympic organizers approached Lonnie about having Ali light the torch, she didn't hesitate. She knew what it would mean to him. She knew what it would mean to millions of people living with disabilities and chronic illnesses. The decision was kept secret until the last possible moment. Even most of the athletes in the opening ceremony didn't know who the final torchbearer would be. Billy Payne, the head of the Atlanta Olympic Organizing Committee, had met with Ali privately to discuss the plan. "Can you do this?" Payne had asked. "We need to know you can hold the torch and light the cauldron. If you can't, we need to make other arrangements. There's no shame in saying no." Ali had looked Payne in the eye, his gaze steady even though his body shook, and nodded. He could do it. He would do it. They practiced in secret. Ali worked with his doctors to adjust his medications, timing them so his symptoms would be minimally controlled during the ceremony. But Parkinson's is unpredictable. Stress makes it worse, and there's no stress quite like performing in front of 3 billion people. The opening ceremony itself was a spectacular display, celebrating 100 years of modern Olympic Games. Thousands of performers filled the stadium. Music swelled. Gladys Knight sang "Georgia on My Mind." The crowd of 85,000 people in the stadium and 3 billion watching on television around the world were swept up in the pageantry. The torch made its way through the stadium, passed from Olympian to Olympian, each one a champion, each one representing the Olympic ideal. Finally, Olympic swimmer Janet Evans received the torch and began running up a long ramp that led to a platform high above the stadium floor. The camera followed her ascent. The crowd cheered. Everyone assumed Janet Evans would light the cauldron herself. She was an Olympic champion, a beloved figure in American sports. It made perfect sense. Evans reached the top of the ramp, turned a corner, and there, waiting on a platform, was Muhammad Ali. The moment the camera found him, the stadium erupted, not with cheers at first, but with gasps. 85,000 people simultaneously recognizing Ali and simultaneously realizing what they were about to witness. Then the gasps turned to applause, then to a roar that seemed to shake the stadium itself. People in the crowd started crying immediately before Ali had even touched the torch. They knew what this moment meant. Ali stood in a white Olympic warm-up suit. Even from a distance, even on television screens around the world, you could see his left hand shaking violently. His arm trembled. His face, frozen by Parkinson's into limited expression, looked almost serene. But his body told the story of the struggle. He looked fragile. He looked vulnerable. He looked nothing like the Ali of 1960 who'd won Olympic gold in Rome, or the Ali of 1974 who'd shocked the world by defeating George Foreman. And yet, in that moment, standing on that platform with the eyes of the world upon him, he'd never been greater.
Janet Evans handed Ali the torch. You could see the concern on her face as she let go, the fear that he might drop it, the desire to help him but knowing she had to step back and let him do this alone. This was Ali's moment. Evans descended the ramp, leaving Ali alone on the platform. Ali's left hand closed around the torch. The shaking intensified with the added weight. The flame flickered. The entire world held its breath. In living rooms and bars and public squares around the planet, 3 billion people were frozen watching this man struggle with a simple task that should have been easy. Hold a torch, light a fuse. That's all he had to do. But with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, nothing was simple. In the television broadcast booth, legendary commentator Bob Costas made a decision that would become part of Olympic history. As the camera stayed on Ali's trembling form, as the seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, Costas stopped talking. He let the moment speak for itself. No analysis, no explanation, no feel-good commentary, just silence. Just Ali, alone with the torch, fighting his own body to complete this one task. The silence was profound. In a medium that abhors dead air, that fills every second with commentary, music, and noise, Costas gave us silence. And in that silence, we could all hear what wasn't being said. We could hear the struggle. We could hear the courage. We could hear 3 billion people around the world pulling for this man to succeed. Ali stood there, torch in hand, his body betraying him in the most public way imaginable. His left arm shook so violently it looked like the torch might fly out of his grip. But Ali's right hand came up to steady the torch. Both hands now, gripping the handle, trying to control the tremors through sheer force of will. The flame danced and flickered. He took a small step forward toward the fuse mechanism that would send fire racing up to the cauldron high above the stadium. In the stands, Lonnie Ali stood with her hands clasped in prayer.
She'd helped him practice this at home, helped him build up the strength in his arms, helped him work through the mechanics of holding the torch and lighting the fuse. She knew he could do it, but she also knew that Parkinson's was unpredictable, that stress made the tremors worse, that the weight of 3 billion people watching could overwhelm anyone, let alone a man fighting a degenerative neurological disease. Behind the scenes, Olympic officials were holding their breath. They had a backup plan, of course. If Ali couldn't complete the lighting, someone would step in, but they desperately didn't want to use it. They knew this moment was bigger than the Olympics. They knew that watching Ali struggle and succeed would mean more than any perfectly executed ceremony ever could. But Ali didn't need a backup plan. He'd spent his entire life proving doubters wrong. He'd been told he was too small to be heavyweight champion. He'd been told refusing Vietnam would end his career. He'd been told at 32 he was too old to defeat George Foreman. He'd been told that Parkinson's would take away his dignity. He'd proven them all wrong. Ali steadied himself. He focused. The trembling continued, but now there was purpose behind it. He was moving the torch toward the fuse, slowly, deliberately. His hands shook, but he kept them moving forward. The flame came close to the fuse, pulled back, close again, away. It was agonizing to watch. Every person in that stadium wanted to help him. Every person watching at home wanted to reach through their television screens and steady his hands. And then, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 seconds, the flame caught. The fuse ignited. Fire began racing up the wire toward the cauldron high above the stadium. Ali had done it. He'd completed the task that had seemed impossible. He stepped back, still holding the torch, still shaking, but victorious. The stadium exploded. 85,000 people erupted in applause, cheers, and tears. The sound was deafening. It wasn't just applause for lighting a torch. It was applause for courage. It was applause for refusing to let disease define you. It was applause for showing the world that dignity and strength have nothing to do with physical perfection. As the flame traveled up to the cauldron and burst into its full glory, illuminating the night sky over Atlanta, the camera stayed on Ali. His face, limited in expression by Parkinson's, somehow managed to convey satisfaction, pride, maybe even joy. He'd done what he came to do. He'd shown the world that Muhammad Ali wasn't finished, that despite everything Parkinson's had taken from him, it couldn't take his spirit.
The applause continued for over 5 minutes. Other Olympic champions on the stadium floor were crying. Spectators who'd come for a sporting event found themselves experiencing something more profound. Athletes who'd spent their lives training for physical perfection were watching a man whose body had failed him still manage to inspire millions. The moment transcended sports, transcended the Olympics, transcended everything except the pure human spirit refusing to surrender. What many people didn't know was the backstory that made this moment even more powerful. In 1960, 18-year-old Cassius Clay had won Olympic gold in Rome. He'd been so proud of that medal that he wore it everywhere, even slept with it. There's a famous story, disputed but widely believed, that Clay threw that gold medal into the Ohio River after being refused service at a whites-only restaurant in Louisville. Whether or not that specific story is true, Clay definitely lost or gave away that original medal. 36 years later, at these Atlanta Olympics, the Olympic Committee had prepared a replacement medal for Ali. Later in the ceremonies, they would present him with a new gold medal to replace the one from 1960. It was a gesture of respect and reconciliation. The young fighter who'd been refused service because of his skin color was now being honored by the same country that had once rejected him. The boxer who'd been stripped of his title for refusing military service was now representing America on its biggest stage. After the ceremony, reporters asked Ali's daughter Hannah what the moment had meant to her father. She said, "He wanted to show people that Parkinson's doesn't mean your life is over," she said. He wanted to inspire people who are struggling with illness or disability. He wanted them to know that you can still have dignity, still have purpose, still have moments of greatness. The image of Ali lighting the Olympic torch became instantly iconic. It was on the front page of newspapers around the world. It was replayed endlessly on television. People who'd never watched boxing, who'd never followed Ali's career, were moved by what they'd witnessed. The photograph of Ali, hands shaking, holding that torch, became a symbol not just of one man's courage, but of the human spirit's refusal to be defeated. In the days after the ceremony, the Olympic Organizing Committee received thousands of letters from people with Parkinson's disease, with other disabilities, with chronic illnesses, thanking them for choosing Ali. Many wrote that seeing Ali on that platform had given them hope. If the greatest could stand in front of 3 billion people and let them see his struggle, if he could be that vulnerable and still be that strong, then maybe they could face their own struggles with more courage. The moment also changed how people thought about Parkinson's disease. Before that night, many people didn't really understand what Parkinson's was. They knew it involved shaking, but they didn't understand the full scope of the disease. Seeing Ali struggle with such a simple task, seeing his body betray him so publicly, educated millions of people about what Parkinson's patients face every day. The visibility and awareness that moment created led to increased funding for Parkinson's research and better support for patients. Ali himself rarely spoke about that night, partly because speaking had become difficult for him. But in a 2004 interview, using a voice synthesizer to help him communicate, he said, "Lighting the torch was one of the greatest honors of my life. Not because of the Olympics, but because I could show people that you don't quit. You never quit. No matter what your body does, your spirit doesn't have to quit." That's the real story of that night in Atlanta. It wasn't about lighting a torch or starting Olympic Games. It was about a man who'd spent his life fighting, who'd won and lost more times than most people can imagine, showing the world one more time that the most important fights aren't the ones in the ring. They're the fights we have with our own limitations, our own fears, our own bodies that sometimes refuse to do what we ask them to do. Muhammad Ali stood on that platform with the whole world watching, his hands shaking, his body failing, and he lit that torch anyway. He did it scared, he did it sick, he did it knowing he might fail in front of 3 billion people, but he did it because that's what champions do. They show up, they fight, they refuse to let their circumstances define them. If this story of courage in the face of impossible odds inspired you, share it with someone who's facing their own struggle. And remember, greatness isn't about being perfect. It's about refusing to quit when everything in your body is telling you to give up. Muhammad Ali taught us that lesson one more time on a summer night in Atlanta, and the whole world was better for witnessing it.